Okay, so this is Patrie exercise 6.3. My name is Pam Chrysosimo, and this summer I've been working at a lab in UCSD. Basically, my job has been to isolate plasmid DNA for injections for my studies. I'm a double major at Stanford, or at least I hope to be at this point. I'm undeclared. And so I major in bio, and eventually I want to go to med school. So volunteering at a laboratory seemed like a pretty good idea, and I've actually learned a phenomenal amount. I came into the lab at ground zero, knowing nothing about molecular bio, and now I've just learned a lot this summer. So my job is to make DNA, basically, and in order to make DNA, I need to go through two major steps. And the first step is growing up the bugs or bacteria. And the second step is going through a process which breaks down the bugs, breaks down the bacteria, the cell walls, and removes the proteins and stuff, and then isolate the DNA from that. So what I'm going to describe is how to start a culture of DNA. Start a small culture of DNA, and that's called inoculation. So the first thing I need to do is I need to figure out what number the plasmid is. For example, today my boss told me that I'd have to make a culture of NCMV B71 tomorrow. So in order to do that, I need to grow the bugs up overnight. And so I go into our catalog of DNA, and the number for NCMV B71 is number 32. So I need to remember that number, because when I go into the freezer, there's a lot of DNA in little tubes and with certain numbers on them. And so rather than wasting my time looking on the labels of all the tubes, there's numbers on the top, so I just remember the number 32. And so the first thing that Delphine taught me was to label everything. So I get a piece of colored tape and write the number 32. You need three things when you label. You need the name of what it is, the date, and your initials. And so I put number 32 in CMV B71. And the date is 8/27/96, and PC are my initials. And I stick the colored tape on a 3 mil is milliliter. I get a 10 mil culture tube and aliquot 3 mils of LME into it. And LB is Laria broth, and Laria broth is the media the media in which the bacteria grow, the bugs grow. And so I aliquot 3 mils of LB into the culture tube, and in order to aliquot that amount, we need to be precise. So we have a tool called the pipette aid, and it's kind of a suction thing. In chemistry, you use bulbs, but this is more of a mechanic thing. And we stick the pipette into the pipette aid and suction up 3 mils of LB, and then we put 3 mils of this LB into the culture tube. And after that, this plasmid has to be ampicillin resistant, so we go into the freezer. And in my box, I have a little tube of A100, and A100 stands for ampicillin 100 milligrams per milliliter. And so since this is frozen, I need to take the ampicillin out of the freezer and put it on the heat block in order to thaw it, because you can't remove things you can't pipette out of something that's frozen. So I put it on the heat block, and once it's thawed, I get a different thing called a pipette men, which it's blue, and you use the pipette different small amounts up. And so I pipette up 3 microliters, which is, we call them it's called lambda, LAMBDA, and that's a Greek letter. And I pipette 3 lambda of the thawed ampicillin and aliquot that, eject that into the 3 mils of LB. And so now any bacteria or any bugs that grow in this LB will be ampicillin resistant. And so then I make sure to put that back in the freezer, because that needs to be frozen and it can't be left outside. And then after that's ready, I make sure the cap is on and the label is on, make sure everything's okay. And then I need to go into the freezer room in order to get my bugs. So now that the media is ready and the culture tube is ready and everything is labeled, then I go into the freezer room. And the bacteria is stored at negative 80 degrees Celsius. So I make sure before I start, I always have my gloves on because these things are biohazardous. So I take my tray where I have my 10 ml culture tube, and then I take my pipette, then a box of pipette tips, and also and that's it. And so I go into the freezer room and I open the negative 80 degree freezer and I pull up the box, the deep box where the bacteria is stored, and then I pull out the box and then I look for number 32. So then I take out my little tube which has number 32 on it, and then I put the rest of the box, I close the box and put it back in the freezer because you don't want all the other things to be thawing out at once. So you make sure to close that, and then so I have my pipette with my box of pipette tips, and then so I scrape a little bit, using my pipette tips, I scrape a little bit of the NCMV B71 with the end of my tip and put a little chunk of that into the 3 mils of LME plus amp. So I put that in there, and then I pipette up and pipette down in order to remove anything that might have gotten stuck in the pipette. And then I, if the glycerol stalk is too frozen and you can't isolate a chunk, then you take out some of the LB and you pipette up and you squirt some of that room temperature LB into the frozen glycerol stalk in order to soften it so that you have kind of like a slushy mush. And then you can't remove some of the bacteria that's frozen there because it's softened, and then you can remove a chunk from there. So then after you've done that, you scrape it a little bit and then put it into the LB amp, and then you twist the cover back on and put it back into the negative 80 degree freezer. So then only that has been maybe chilled a little bit, gotten maybe a little bit warmer. So then you put it back and make sure nothing else is thawed. And then then you have that into solution because it defrosts pretty quickly. So you have your bugs in solution, and then you make sure you dispose of your pipette tip in the biohazard way because it's biohazardous and you don't want anything else to be growing out of there. And then you take the 3 ml culture tube that's labeled and you put it into the shaker room. And the shaker room is where my bugs will grow overnight. But when I'm doing a small culture, first of all, you need to turn down the shaker so that it's not turning so fast. Then you and then you wait till it comes to a complete stop. And after that, you put the 10 ml culture tube on the shaker, and then you turn it up, and then you close the door. It's kept at 37 degrees, and so you make sure that the shaker comes on again because a lot of people have different stuff growing on there. And after that, after it's done, then you let it incubate for about 6 to 7 hours, or however long you're working there. So you need to inoculate a big culture, and right before you leave, you take the small culture. You have 3 mils, and then you take the small culture and separate that. That's it.